Hi, everybody. Welcome to What It Takes. This is a very special episode for our recent UCD graduates. We run it with UCD Careers Network. The series is all about giving you guys the tools to launch your career in today's rapidly changing world. I'm really excited to have the two speakers we have with us today. First of all, you'll be hearing from Siobhan O'Shea. She's Client Services Director for CPL, Ireland's largest talent solutions organization. She heads up diversity and inclusion for CPL's Future of Work Institute and is a frequent speaker and brand ambassador on workplace and labor market trends, as well as the future of work and D&I. Siobhan's experience spans 18 years of recruitment and talent leadership experience in Ireland, combined with 7 years experience in New York and San Francisco, for anyone who might be interested in careers abroad as well. Siobhan's also a UCD alumna and with a Bachelor of Commerce degree. Next, we'll hear from Grace Oladipo, who is a fellow recent graduate from the class of 2020. Grace just got her Bachelor of Civil Law European degree and is a recipient of the UCD President's Award. She's the founder of Fiberberry, a startup that uses plant waste to make school shoes for children in Nigeria, and the co-founder of the Student Collective, a mentoring initiative that brings third-level students and sixth-year students together. She's also the student coordinator for the African Professional Network of Ireland. So once we hear from Siobhan and then Grace, we'll move on to a Q&A session moderated by Michelle Cohen. Michelle works with us here at UCD as a team leader and career and skills consultant with UCD Careers Network. She teaches career readiness modules, facilitates workshops and employer events, and she also offers one-on-one coaching. So throughout the webinar, please feel free to send in your questions. There's a little button at the bottom here. It says Q&A where you can pop those in anytime. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand things over to Siobhan.
Thanks, Camille, and thanks to all of Ria and all of the team at UCD for the invite to speak to you guys today on a subject that's very close to my heart. So I might share my slides there first, just to get the ball rolling. And can you see them okay there? Camille, just to confirm.
Looks great. Yeah,
perfect. Okay, great. So over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk to you all about what it's like to develop your career in this new world that we're facing. And what I'll cover really is some of the trends that we're seeing in the current market, how you can go about getting job ready. I'm sure many of you are already well into that process. And then the importance of upskilling, why it matters and how you can go about it. So in terms of some of the current landscape updates, what I would say is it's really unbelievable what's happened this year in terms of how quickly the labour market has shifted from a situation where we were in full employment in January to overnight nearly hitting our worst unemployment rate in May at a rate of nearly 28%, down from 5% back in January. So, I mean, it's been a huge earthquake nearly to the employment market, and what it has meant is that what we would call the power has shifted really from being an employee-led landscape to very much an employer-led landscape now, where there's an abundance of talent. What we are seeing is that many sectors have held up incredibly well and have been very resilient, and I'm sure many of you would have seen that in the latest news updates that have come out this week alone. And some of those sectors that are particularly buoyant even in this climate are sectors like healthcare, life sciences, pharma, certain parts of financial services, and that will probably come as no surprise to many of you. And then equally on the flip side, some of the worst hit sectors have been sectors like hospitality, travel, tourism, and retail have been really badly hit, I suppose, by the COVID pandemic. So those are just a few updates. What is positive to see is that the unemployment rate has come back in check, with people coming back off the payment scheme and people who have been furloughed are back working again. So we're now back down to kind of a 15% holding pattern, and fingers crossed, all going well, that will continue to move back down over the coming months as we return to offices. So in terms of what this has meant to the world of work is overnight we have all shifted to working in a remote working environment, and certainly we would see that in our own business in CPL, where over 1,100 100 of our people went from a situation where they had been office-based to now being home-based in how they approach their work. And that's been a huge shift, and that will be a shift for all of you as graduates coming into the working world, that you may be starting your new job and being onboarded remotely and working virtually, and for certainly the short term, but right potentially into the medium term into 2021. So you need to consider that and embrace that and be ready for that, because that is the way it will be. And particularly we're even seeing it now with certain parts of the country in lockdown, and that we may be in and out of that for a period. So you have to think about what will that mean for you in adapting to your new job and in settling in, and it'll take that extra effort to network and to connect to colleagues too, and that you may need to take into consideration as you start your working life. And then positively to say, in terms of climate for graduates, what I'm really encouraged to share is that any of the employers that we work with, and most of the employers that I'm aware of in the domestic market, are continuing to proceed with all of their graduate programs and to start hiring into 2021 for next year's programs. And I suppose one of the big factors around this was learnings from the last recession over a decade ago, where a lot of employers had stopped their graduate programs, and then there was a huge knock-on impact into the talent pipeline then, a 3 to 5 year period later. So very positively, I think, certainly all of our customers and clients that we work with are proceeding with business as usual and just adapting the model, I suppose, to onboard the graduates in that virtual way that I mentioned. So in thinking about getting job ready, I suppose, first of all, I might touch on the most important aspects around your CV and getting interview ready. Now, I would take it as a given that most of you probably have an updated CV at this stage. So there's just a few pointers that I might highlight around this. And firstly, just to note, and it may come as a shock to some of you, but research has shown that most talent acquisition people or recruiters will spend, at a glance, 7 seconds reviewing your CV. 7 seconds, let me emphasize that. So it is so important that you create a CV that best positions to win you that interview. And it may mean having multiple versions of your CV to tailor them to the direct opportunity that you're applying for. So don't go sending out blanket CVs or blanket cover letters to opportunities in the market. You need to think outside the box and go above and beyond in terms of communicating your value proposition, why you, what are your unique selling points, and really think about highlighting your achievements and your successes as clearly as possible, but not in too long of a format, because that's one of the things we see a lot of. A graduate CV really should be no more than 2 pages optimally. And don't be worried about what others have achieved and their results and what they may be selling versus you. You have to focus on your attributes and what you're bringing to the table. You have to control the controllables and position everything as possible, as well as possible, in terms of why you for this opportunity, and why are you the best person for the job. And that's the thing I would most focus on when it comes to your CV. And make sure, just take, again, I take it as a given, no grammar issues or spelling issues, but I would say come to recruiters like us in CPL and look for help if you need any help on this. And I will be sharing links to some toolkits that we've provided for free through CPL on how to interview well and how to produce an excellent CV. So just in terms of making your CV stand out, it really is around making sure that you don't just put responsibilities, but that you link them to outputs, because most of you would probably have had some part-time work experience over the course of your studying period. And to make sure that you highlight, if you haven't had part-time work or work placement experience, that you're highlighting maybe committee work or work that you did in other capacities, because those are all very transferable skills as well. And you need to amplify anything that will help you, I suppose, secure that opportunity. Good news on interviews, certainly the dynamics have changed. Many of you might have even seen that already, and it is positive. Of course, they're all now virtual. Only in very senior roles are we seeing people still, creating situations where they have a socially distanced face-to-face meeting. There had already been a trend towards a shift on competency-based questions. And for anyone who's maybe not familiar with that, it's very much around highlighting examples to demonstrate your attributes and your skills. So where did you demonstrate teamwork? Where did you demonstrate really good collaboration? And those type of questions, and really to be ready for those. And positively, I think, because a lot of employers realize how tricky this can be for all of us and for everyone in terms of this transition to being interviewed from your laptop, that there is a more conversational approach to make you relax and to help you get into the rhythm of it. So keep that in mind. It is helping to streamline the process and accelerate decision making, which is really good for you guys. We're seeing that actually time to hire in many cases, and the research is showing since COVID has kicked in, has been reduced by 80%. And if you think about that, decision makers who may have been traveling, or who may have been, working overseas, or just may not have had the same time capacity to run through interview processes, are getting through them a lot speedier than ever before. And we're seeing that first, second, and final interviews, if there are the three processes, are happening in a really fast fashion, which may not have been the case previously. And the benefits for you in this new world of interviewing is that you have the comfort of working or interviewing from your own home. You can set yourself up really well for success. And I think that's a real confidence builder. And you have the secret armor, which is that you can have all your notes surrounding you, and you can have them stuck along the wall or on Post-its or whatever to help prompt you on all of the things that you must cover in that interview that are your secret weapons or your advantages. So you should do that. I have it here. I have my notes hanging up behind me here to remind me in case I forget to mention anything. So it's something we can do now when we're in our home environment. So make sure and stack those odds in your favor. Certainly their time efficiency, when you look at it now, we don't have to commute to interviews. You're saving hours of time of waiting in an office for an interview. And it's certainly, we're seeing that interview turnaround time is really efficient in a way that it never was before. So some of my key advice when it comes to interviews would be, you absolutely have to know what you're going to say before you say it. So have answers prepared up for every kind of a traditional question that could come up. So tell us a bit about yourself. What are your key achievements? What are your greatest successes? These type of things are very, traditional. And then for the competency-based questions that I mentioned as well. Doing mock interviews with friends, family, people in your network really can make a difference to iron out any kinks or any tics that you might have that you may not be aware of. So absolutely an essential. I mean, I often say that it does take at least 20 to 25 hours to properly prepare for interviewing, and really you need to invest that time in yourself. Be sure to show your passion. It can be hard when you're connecting for someone remotely to be able to demonstrate your energy, enthusiasm, but it is really important, and try and bring that to the table. And don't take for granted that the fact that you are doing an interview from home, that it might be less formal or casual. So be sure to dress to impress, and mirror and match to the employer that you're interviewing with. So if they're a very formal company, you need to be suited and booted. If they're more relaxed or more informal and casual, you can take it down a notch. So just watch for those things, and then beware the distractions that can throw you off, basically. So it could be, younger siblings or people kind of arriving into the house, so make sure and set yourself up in the best way possible to avoid any of those distractions. So a few tips on selling yourself. And firstly, what I might highlight is what we call the elevator pitch. So if you had an opportunity to be in a lift with somebody for 30 seconds and to sell yourself, what would you say? Do you know what you would say? Would you get the job? And the same for a 3-minute and a 30-minute. So that's something you need to practice, and you need to think about, and you need to script up and prepare and have really thought through. And it really is a good rigor to have done for interviewing as well. And we see the benefits from people who put in that time and effort and in the outcomes when they, or whether they're successful or otherwise. Personal communication cannot be emphasized enough. So research back in a US university from the 1970s showed that a huge amount of what people think about us is actually based on our personal communication. So it's things like our tone of voice, our energy, are we smiling, are we making eye contact? And if I spoke really monotone all the time like this, wouldn't you find me really boring and you probably wouldn't want to listen to this? So think about, how do you communicate? Are you going to have to work at this? Sometimes it can come very easily to some people, and for other people, they may have to think about that and really put the work into communicating remotely in a way that really is engaging. So do think about that and ask yourself honestly, how are you coming across? What do people think of you? And that's part of that mock interview that can really help iron out those kinks. So this is basically a slide that I've been sharing in presentations for several years, and the data comes from the World Economic Forum. And I think it's really important to highlight, and it's really interesting, that this was actually assembled before COVID ever kicked in, and it's all around the importance of our what are called soft skills, but really I think they're the really important meaty skills that will help carry us through the next decade and the future of work. And it's really interesting to see that some of the new soft skills that moved into the predictions were probably so on the money in the context of what we're now experiencing. So things like critical thinking, emotional intelligence, complex problem solving is still there at the very top, and certainly it's as relevant, more relevant than ever. In this new climate we're in, and the same for creativity. So think about your soft skills too, and transferable skills, particularly for those who are maybe having to pivot now and maybe had done degrees in subjects that are in sectors that may be challenged at the moment. So really think about your transferable skills and where have you demonstrated all of these core skills in prior work or prior opportunities, and throughout your college courses as well. So really important to really bring that to the table. So then finally, what I'm going to talk to is upskilling and its importance. And interestingly, there is a stat that shows that 70% of employers are more likely to shortlist employees who regularly upskill. And what we would see more than ever through the Future Work Institute is that the importance of lifelong learning cannot be overemphasized. World Economic Forum have predicted that there's going to be a huge amount of redundant work jobs coming out over the coming decade as a result of automation and robotics. And for every job though that is made redundant, you're going to see 2 new jobs created as a result of this generation of new activity from the 4th Industrial Revolution. And we've even seen it if you think of all the tech roles that now exist in the market and that didn't exist 15, 20 years ago. So there's huge amount of benefits to upskilling, and I've outlined them all there. But I think critically it is about thinking about, the future. That even I look at myself, when I went to, as Camille said, I spent some time in the States, and I have pivoted in my own career numerous times. So I started out in Wall Street, and within a couple of years, I moved into media and I worked with the television network for a few years. Then I came back to Ireland, back to scratch again, kind of fell into recruitment and have taken on multiple different roles within the world of recruitment over that 18 years. So things are never static, things are always changing, and you need to be able to kind of, embrace that and bring that into your skill set in terms of how you go about embracing learning. And I certainly have found, even over recent years, I've taken on some kind of further studies and have really enhanced my my knowledge and what I'm bringing into my organization too. So people do appreciate seeing that, and it's very much supported and encouraged within most organizations as well. But for those who maybe are not in a situation where it's easily accessible, there's plenty of resource available in the market. And the first one I'd highlight is government supported courses for postgrad, for undergrad, and there are literally over 11,000 places available right now that are all heavily subsidized through government support. So it's worth having a look at the Springboard courses and seeing if there's anything that would be particularly relevant. What has become clear is that Digital is going to be more important than ever in the future. Over 9 out of 10 jobs are going to require high-level digital skills. That's the prediction. And there's really good free resources through the digital garage classes through Google, and then plenty of other resource available to a few we've suggested there that in microbyte or in part-time methodologies through the Open University, through UCD itself, and then Udemy. And some of you may have already have access to some of these courses, because, you know, definitely if you're in a situation where you're still looking for a job at the moment, it's important to keep yourself occupied and keep your brain stimulated, because it is, you know, can be challenging having to go through the process waiting for feedback from CVs that you sent out and trying to get those interviews. So it's a good idea to try and think of ways to keep yourself occupied. And certainly if you're considering further education, going on doing a master's or that's something I would encourage as well, certainly more than ever in the current climate too. So finally, just to kind of summarize, a couple of things I would say is, keep yourself open to all opportunities. Say yes. I mean, sometimes what we think we want and what we actually end up wanting are completely different things. And I've learned that over my 25 years of working life. And, you know, it's funny, if you had said to me where I would end up, I would never have predicted it. Back when I was graduating, actually, 25 years ago this year. And actually, interestingly, we were due to have our 25-year BCom reunion just this month. So it's hard for me to even believe how fast that time has gone. And yet, when I look back on it, it feels like a blink of an eye. Just remember, hiring is still happening. Companies are still scaling. You know, certainly the SMEs have probably been hardest hit. The internationals, the multinationals are very much, it's BAU, and they're continuing to hire. And I think that's a really positive message for Ireland and for our economy. Then when it comes to your job seeking processes, practice, practice, practice. You know, I'm a big believer in the adage that fail to prepare, prepare to fail. So it's really important you put that work in, and it will pay off. Not going to be easy, but certainly it's, you know, everything comes to those who work hard. And just on a positive note, just to say, look, I'm wishing you all really well in your careers. You know, I'm a big believer also that your attitude is your altitude. So try and keep focused on keeping yourself occupied and keeping yourself focused on all of the things that you can do to help set yourself up for success, and put on those superhero capes. It will be a tough period. And I know already, I think the graduates have demonstrated unbelievable resilience through this period of time that we've experienced in the crisis, and I'm wishing you only the best into the future. So just a few little highlights there of some of those toolkits I mentioned, which we will share afterwards, and some of our white papers as well for anyone who wants to find out more about the future of work, and just to thank you. And then I'm going to pass it over now to Grace, and really looking forward to hear her story.
Amazing, amazing. Wow. I really hope everyone's been taking notes, because I have. But thank you so much for introducing me, Siobhan, and thank you so much. Just before I even begin, I'd love to say a massive thank you to the UCD Alumni Office. Love to say thank you to Camille, Ria, and Melissa. It's been absolutely amazing working with you guys and just seeing your heart for the alumni and your heart for the graduate class of 2020. Just before I begin, my name is Grace Oladipo, as everyone said. I wear a couple of hats, so I'm particularly passionate about leadership and social entrepreneurship. So I run a couple of organizations and also volunteer in a couple of organizations as well. Yeah, let's just get into it. So I'm just going to talk about, I guess, in the class of 2020 and my thoughts and my fears and what we can do to actually excel in this season that we've been thrown into practically. One thing I've learned over the past couple of years is that every time you're about to transition into a new stage of life, there are always fears that try to cripple you. So every time you try to transition, there's always fears that try to cripple you. And so now that you know that, you can move on, accepting those fears and seeing what you can do about them. So for example, I look back on the times in my life when I've had to transition into different areas of my life. So for example, my family moved to Ireland when I was 8 years old. And before we moved to Ireland, we lived in Nigeria. So I'm kind of Nigerian Irish. And before we moved to Ireland, I used to, every Christmas, we would travel all over Nigeria, visiting family members. My dad loved driving the car. So we would travel all over, visiting family members every Saturday. And this was probably my favorite part, but every Saturday, my dad would go out. Before he would go out, he would give me 10 naira, which is equivalent to 0.02330 cents, barely €1. But my father would literally give that to me, and I loved that so much because I could literally buy the best chocolate biscuits in the world with that 10 naira. And when we moved to Ireland, I couldn't get the chocolate biscuits anymore. And that's something I really remember about the transition. And I was so scared about whether people would like me in Ireland, whether I would fit in, whether I would understand how people were talking, or how whether people would understand how I was talking. And I remember looking back on that transition and seeing just how amazing the change has been for me, even though I was so fearful. It's all worked out really, really well. And even looking back, I'm sure some of you can relate to before you started your time in UCD and how scared you were. I remember standing at the gates and thinking, yes, I am going to get lost in UCD. There's no way I'm going to know where to go. I'm not going to know what lectures to go to. I'm not going to know how to talk to the lecturers. And then looking back on that journey and seeing how much I have grown, and the fact that I can practically walk through UCD with my eyes closed, I think that's definitely a win. So when you're trying to transition, there's so many fears that come into your heart, and I'm sure many of you had fears. I had fears approaching final year. I was worried that a lot of my achievements would be insignificant because I wouldn't be a student anymore. I was worried about entering the job market for real. I was worried about becoming an adult and practically catering for myself. And I was also worried, especially towards the end of the second semester, I was worried about the impact of COVID on my job, the impact of COVID on whether I'd be able to get a full-time job, whether I'd be able to continue the things that I was doing. But in the midst of all those fears and in the midst of trying to maneuver what was going through my mind, I realized that appreciation was so key. And so even in this moment where we're like thinking, okay, I've got these fears, I have graduated, I am UCD alumni. It still feels weird to say that, but I'm part of the UCD alumni. And I have so many next steps. I have to make sure that I get a job. I have to make sure that I'm upskilling. I have to make sure that my CV is up to date. I have to make sure that my LinkedIn profile is up to date. In the midst of thinking of all those next steps, sometimes we lose focus of the fact that we've come so far. And I'm not saying that you should keep living life looking at the rearview mirror, but I am saying that it's important to look in the rearview mirror once in a while and look back on the journey that you've come up on. So I know that for the past couple of months, parents have been applauding us, lecturers have been applauding us, deans have been applauding us, but I wonder if you took some time, even just 10 seconds, to applaud yourself for how far you've come. And if you didn't do it, we're going to take 10 seconds right now to just say, well done to you, a pat on the back for literally finishing your degree in the midst of this pandemic, for coming to this webinar to see what it takes to start your career. And if you've been in the job market for a while, for your resilience, keep going and continuing on. Right. So now that we've done that, well done, well done, well done. I'm proud of us. There's a few keys that I have for us to just maneuver the job market and maneuver this very interesting season that we're in. So first of all, keep an open mind. Because of the pandemic, I wasn't able to get internships that I would have applied for. So some of the companies I would have applied to canceled their internship programs. And every summer, I try to make sure that I do a summer job or do an internship to make sure I can support my parents with the finances at home. So this pandemic really hit that plan. And I was also planning to travel for a bit because this was going to be my last summer before I enter the real world of work, and I really wanted to travel. The pandemic really got in the way of that, and I had to keep an open mind. So instead of just sitting at home and just staring at my TV, I decided to join a mentorship program at the Global Purpose Enterprise. And this organization basically seeks to transform the lives of young Black people in relation to areas of career and business, finance, relationships, and so on. And when the opportunity came for me to actually volunteer at this organization, I did so. And I became a project manager and a purpose ambassador. And through those roles, I have been able to upskill. I never, ever expected that I would be doing project management. First of all, I'm a law student. We do law. But because of that, I've been able to upskill. I've been able to organize events, virtual events with hundreds of people attending. I've been able to know how to reach out to people through emails. I've literally upskilled so much in that role. And I did not anticipate doing that ever. I didn't even plan to be a project manager this summer. And I know that many of us have found ourselves in positions that we didn't really envisage. That's okay, because it's kind of like when you go in a car and you know where you're going. Maybe you're going to your favorite shop or you're going to your favorite supermarket, and the GPS tells you to take a different route. And it's not a route that you're normally comfortable with. But if you take that route, you still end up at your destination. It might not be the route that you had ahead of you. It's still a good route and you end up at your destination. And it's the same way with keeping an open mind. Regardless of the obstacles that you face, and regardless of the the trials that the pandemic is throwing at us, and the fact that the job market isn't what we envisaged it would be, you'll still get to your destination if you keep an open mind. So next up, secondly, show yourself a little grace. And yes, the pun is intended. So what I mean by show yourself a little grace is be kind to yourself. It's so important to understand that a lot of what's going on around you, especially with the job market, a lot of it is out of your control. And so it's important that you're looking after your mental health, looking after your physical health, not being terrible to yourself. As a man thinks, so is he. Minding the thoughts that are going through your mind, minding the things that you're saying to yourself. It's so important that you're kind to yourself and you do not compare yourself to other people. I know that it's so easy to think, well, I was in that class with her and now she has a job. I was in that class with her and now she's doing a master's. I was in that class with her and she's got a business now. It's so easy to compare yourself to people's journey, but you have your own journey to walk on. You have your own unique path to follow. And it's so important that you don't get caught up in comparing yourself, because that really affects how you view yourself and how you move forward in this season. Thirdly, I'm going to say be practical. It is very easy for me to sit in my parents' living room, scroll through social media for 6 hours, and practically become the sofa in my parents' living room. But it's so important that I don't do that. And it's the same with each and every one of us here that is either seeking a job or just trying to make sure that we're excelling in what we're doing. Be practical. Don't spend all day on social media. If you are looking for a job and maybe you've been applying through Indeed, maybe change your approach and try applying through LinkedIn instead. If you've been emailing people, maybe change your approach by calling them. I remember one of my friends recently, she was struggling with actually finding a job. And so she texted me and she said, Grace, do you know what? I'm really struggling with the job search. Do you know anybody in your network who can help me to find a job? And I said, yeah, sure, I'll look around. And I emailed someone who I knew who worked in PayPal. And that person is currently helping her with her job application. And hopefully she'll get the job soon. You have to reach out to people in your network and ask questions. And just on this point as well, I think that LinkedIn is probably one of the most underestimated social media platforms for students. I think sometimes we don't really know what to do with it. We just think that there's just professionals on it and it feels really inaccessible to us as students. But I think, first of all, if you do not have a LinkedIn profile, please make one. The UCD Career Development Center are really great at helping you with making those. Michelle is here as well. You might be able to reach out to her. But what you'll find on LinkedIn is that you'll find people who have amazing business ideas. You meet like-minded students like yourself. You meet professionals who can propel you into the new season of your career. And you also meet HR managers who can help you with your CV, your cover letters, and sometimes you might not really know what to do with your LinkedIn profile. Just to say, like, I'm speaking to you all today because I use LinkedIn. So I recently wrote an article called The Class of 2020, and Camille read the article and she reached out to me and asked me to speak to you guys today. So LinkedIn has many benefits for students like ourselves, or well, alumni like ourselves. It's still hard to say the word. But it has many benefits for us, and a LinkedIn post could be as simple as literally taking 2 points that you enjoyed from this webinar, taking 2 points that you learned from this webinar, and posting them and @ing UCD alumni and @ing Siobhan, and just saying that you really enjoyed the webinar, or you learned something from the webinar, or just your thoughts on what it takes to excel in your career this year. It could be literally 2 lines. LinkedIn is actually very accessible to young people and alumni like ourselves. Number 4, I really love this point. People make the journey. So I've got 2 of my closest friends here, and the young lady in the graduation gown was literally my assignment buddy, my crime buddy, my exam buddy, my law buddy. Like, we literally did everything together because she studied law with social justice. And literally, when you're transitioning, temptation could be to leave the people behind that you've taken that journey with. So you can look back and say, well, they don't really fit into where I'm going now. But it's so important that we do not neglect the relationships that have enhanced our journey so far. There are so many people in your life that have helped you either through exam seasons, or just people that you sat at UCD Lake with, chasing the birds away, and people you found the secret lake with, people you spent hours in the library with, people you did musicals with, people you did concerts with. So many amazing people who have really contributed to your UCD journey and your journey as a student. Don't fall into the temptation of neglecting those relationships, because those relationships have enabled you to get to where you are, and you need to nurture them. But I'll also say that as you step into this new season of being an alumni and entering work, you also meet super amazing people who will even enhance your adventure even more. And it's so important to keep an open mind in meeting those people, reaching out to those people. I know everything's virtual now, but you'd be surprised how many amazing friends you can make virtually as well. So don't be scared to make new friends, but don't neglect the previous relationships that you did have. Also, number 5, what is in your hands? Okay, and I'm not talking about the lines in your hands. I'm actually talking about what skills do you have? What potential do you have? Sometimes it's so easy to look outside of ourselves and think, oh, what company is hiring? What internship is going on? What is happening outside of me? There's so much inside of you that the world in 2020, in the midst of a pandemic, needs. And what does that look like practically? A friend of mine recently could not get a graduate job, and she was quite distraught, and she was quite disappointed about that. What she found was she was really passionate about jewelry, and so she set up her own jewelry business and launched it last week. That is something that she would have never thought of doing if she had gotten a graduate job. She's passionate about jewelry, and she's pursued that. As well as that, for me, what does that look like? It's basically setting up the Student Collective. And the Student Collective is an organization that seeks to plug the supports available to 6th-year students in Ireland by pairing them up with 3rd-level students. And how was that in my hands? Well, I'm passionate about leadership. I saw that there was a problem in the support available to 6th-year students, and I wanted to bring a solution to that. So what is in your hand? What does that look like? It could be starting a football club in your community. I know that there's lockdown, so please don't do that, yes? But it could be literally tutoring people online. It could be starting a grind school. It could be starting your own business. It could be selling the paintings that you've had in your house for years. It could be taking up a new skill, learning how to play guitar. But whatever it is in your hands, the world in 2020 needs it, and the world in 2020 needs you to own that skill and to harness that skill and to push it out into the world, whatever that looks like. And so finally, I will say, enjoy where you are. The journey ahead is so beautiful. I'm thinking about 4 years ago when I was completely lost and not knowing what's going on in UCD to where I am now. And looking back on that journey, it's been amazing. I have met so many incredible people. I have done so many incredible things that I would have never expected before. As well as that, you need to remember that what is yet to come is so much greater than what you've ever achieved and everything that's passed. If you thought that university was the highlight of your life, then you need to actually look forward and think, wow, there's so much more to offer. There's so much more for me to offer the world. There's so much more for me to achieve. There's so much more for me to conquer. And that's how I love viewing the world. And one of my favorite poems is by Marianne Williamson, and it's called Our Deepest Fear. And I remember watching one of the greatest movies of this world, Coach Carter. And this young guy, I think I was about 12 or 13 years old, and this young guy was quoting this poem in the movie. And he said, our deepest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. And it's so easy to think that, wow, since university is over, well, that's the end of highlight of my life. But really, I'd like to tell you that because uni is over, you've been unleashed into the world to change it for the better. You've been unleashed into the world to impact it, to leave your own footprint in the sand, whatever that looks like, by keeping an open mind, by using your network, by being practical, by using the people around you, by using what's in your hands. You are powerful beyond measure, and you can achieve so much regardless of the circumstances of COVID and regardless of the circumstances of the economy and the job market that's around us. And I'll just finish with this. There's no point in shrinking so that others won't feel insecure around you. And as you let your own light shine, you unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As you're liberated by from your own fear, your presence automatically liberates others. And so as you step out and use what's in your hands and you excel in that job and give it your absolute best, as you make the decision to just stay positive, regardless of what's going on around you, you're literally liberating everyone else around you to do the same, and you're influencing them and inspiring them to do the same. And what that looks like for me is just relying on the people around me and relying on God to help me through. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. My name is Grace Oladipo. I hope you've enjoyed listening to me, and thank you.
Hi, Grace.
Bye,
Thank you
Michelle.
very much. Thanks very much for that. That was really, really inspiring and really, really great. And also to Siobhan, great hints and tips there that I think all our audience will find really, really useful. So we do have some questions. So Siobhan, this might be most relevant for you. Just we had one of our audience members wondering just about common errors or mistakes that you would see on CVs, and maybe also mistakes at interview that maybe could be easily corrected. What would be kind of common errors you'd see?
Yeah, so look, I think there's a number of things that we tend to see on CVs. So it could be CVs that are too long is a big no-no, and not, high impact enough. So too much waffle, too much padding out, because maybe somebody thinks that's reflecting their attributes well, but actually it's counterproductive. Typos, grammar, it's a never fail. It's unbelievable. Even after over all the years, you'd be astonished at how people just tend to flub a couple of words or grammar or the flow of something. I think not thinking about all of the attributes and skills they can bring into a CV. I think sometimes if people don't maybe sell themselves as well as they could do on their CV as well. So those are probably a couple of the ones I'd highlight. I think with the interviews, it's kind of the corollary of what I just shared maybe on my presentation, which is it's really not being prepared, not having done the homework, not having questions for the client when they ask, do you have any questions, not coming across as really engaged and passionate and energetic, and and I think not delivering a clear proposition to the interviewer as to why you for this job. So I think, you have to be really clear on why, leave that interviewer feeling, oh my God, I have to hire that person. I really want to hire them. And that, if you haven't left them, or if you don't come off that call knowing that they should be feeling that, then what could you be doing more of, So I think there's a huge amount. I think I mentioned it too, like it takes so much work to get ready for interviews, and that work will pay off, and it's about leaning on all those resources you have at your fingertips too. So even through UCD, through your network, through, people are incredibly helpful, as Grace mentioned, in online networking, LinkedIn, people want to help other people. So I think it's about really leveraging all those resources to get that, key opportunity.
Very good. No, that's really helpful. I think it's very helpful that you highlighted the 20 to 25 hours that it takes to prepare, because you might realize that. but also then the CV, probably just making sure that somebody else maybe reviews it before you send
Absolutely.
it off for the
Yeah.
mistakes.
Completely. And I think sometimes when you've looked at your own CV so many times, you're not even seeing things anymore. And that's a really common, you know, kind of mistake, that you think it looks fabulous and it's singing and dancing. But actually that constructive feedback from a neutral observer or a couple of people, to be honest, you should run your CV by a couple of people, and people who are experts who are at reviewing CVs, because as I said, you've got that set, like I would have a really keen eye on CVs to this day. So I would know, I'd spot things straight away. So kind of when I saw that research, I was like, 7 seconds, would I? And I was like, yeah, I would, you know, because I was a recruiter and I was in those shoes once upon a time. So, you know, so I think it's about that legwork that you put in is essential.
Very good. And sorry, just this one might be quite relevant for you as well. Just an audience member just mentioned that they'd heard that the traditional time that kind of recruitment goes quiet, maybe from November to January, because it's coming into holiday time. But is that still true, or would you have noticed that actually that's not as relevant as it used to be years ago?
So I don't think that's as relevant
Okay.
anymore. And I think it'll be even less relevant in this climate, because, you know, a lot of the factors that contributed to it aren't relevant anymore. So people on, you know, tied up with Christmas events and entertaining and networking and all of those kind of things that would have been distractions maybe in December traditionally are completely off the table now. So, you know, I think if employers have needs and requirements, you know, I don't think they're going to be constrained by that November to January. But I would have said historically, you know, in a pre-COVID world, you certainly would have seen things quieten down kind of from mid-December to mid-January would have been pretty typical. And the big ramp periods for recruitment and hiring would tend to be from now actually till about mid-December, and then from mid-January to kind of through to summer. So, you know, summer traditionally would always be a bit quieter because a lot of stakeholders and decision makers would be on holidays.
Yeah.
But I think COVID has kind of changed a lot of the landscape on that.
Very good. So no, thanks for that, because it's an interesting question actually. So very good question, good answer for to the audience member that asked that. Grace, there's some questions coming in for you too. So I suppose I know from meeting you on campus that you're involved across loads and loads of activities. So there is a question really about how you balanced all of that, all your academic work, but also all the activities that you were involved with in UCD. So would you have any tips for people?
Yeah, I think, thank you for that question. I think that it's so important to prioritize, and you've probably heard it 1,000 times, but really knowing when to prioritize and what to prioritize. Sometimes I would say, like, I'd think, okay, what's urgent, what's important, and what can wait. So that kind of really helped me to balance. And I think as well, just understanding that, you know, university, you're there to get a degree. That's not all you're there to do. You're there to have fun. You're there to enjoy yourself. I remember before I started university, someone had said to me, it's either university passes through you or you pass through university. So I definitely wanted to pass through university and make the most out of it. And sometimes it get overwhelming with the amount of activities I was involved in. But looking back on it, I definitely don't have any regrets. I really thoroughly enjoyed getting involved in everything. So I think just making sure to prioritize and know that, well, close to exam time, I can't really take on that much. Close to exam time, at the start of the semester, I can take on a lot. And just knowing yourself and being aware, like being self-aware is so key. Like I know that when I'm stressed, I just like everything down and I take a walk, or I just turn off my phone for a day. And that's so important. So being aware of how stressed you can get sometimes and just prioritizing as well.
Very good. Okay, thanks, Grace. There is, sorry, they're coming in thick and fast, so I just have a look as well. Maybe Siobhan, this might be for you. It's just an interesting one in terms of, you know, you're saying today, and it's really great advice that you're, you know, to prepare and be practicing your interview questions. And I suppose a concern maybe from our, you know, a recent graduate is that, you know, would you be coming across like too rehearsed or not sound genuine? So is there any, I suppose, fine balance? Would you have any tips around that?
Yeah, so, and I think that's a really well made point. And I'll probably use myself as a case in point for today. So I had my homework done on the flow of what I'm going to say, but I put my own spin on it then, or I put my own personality to it. So I'm not a slave to answers. And plus, you can't predict what questions you're going to get asked anyways. I think the point is that you're very comfortable with what your core story is and why you, and your attributes, you know, the key information can be shaped and framed in a thousand different ways. And you can help actually mold how the interview flows by making sure you bring in the things that you really are keen to cover. So I would completely agree. It shouldn't be like a robot reading off a script and sounding like completely over rehearsed and like a canned answer. Like that's not what we're looking for. This is about, though, being very, you know, being very comfortable that when a question comes up, you're going, I've got this, you know, I have got this. And it's kind of like, you know, what Grace said, it's like that, that piece around the more you do of it, the more comfortable you get. And look, I think she's given great example of how she's leveraged her networking on LinkedIn to her benefit. And I think that's something that could be easily replicated to build your confidence in these kind of things. Because it may get to a point that the more homework you put in earlier, the less you have to do and further. You know, if you'll find the first interview the hardest, but subsequent ones, then you'll be like, you know, in a complete rhythm. So I think it's to get the fine line right. And I think that's where the mock interviews help.
Very good. Yeah, great. Thank you, Siobhan. That's really helpful, because I could understand, as if you haven't done much interviews and you want to practice, but you might be wondering, well, what if I'm coming across too rehearsed? So that's really, really helpful.
Yeah.
So we have another two questions, but this one probably open to both of you, Grace and Siobhan. Just I suppose it's maybe around resilience. This person has been researching jobs and coming across a lot of positions where they either don't have the experience or the qualification, and they're kind of maybe wondering, well, like what do they do next? Would you have any tips, maybe Grace? Would you just, I suppose, maybe around that resilience piece? And
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it kind of reminds me of when I was applying for internships in first and second year, and I actually lost count of how many internships I applied to. And it was quite difficult to just give you a rejection letter after rejection letter after rejection letter. But I was listening to a talkcast, and the guy that was speaking about how Thomas Edison got the light bulb in like his 1000th try. So, and I know that's probably something that you might not want to hear, but to be honest, you just have to keep pushing, literally giving every single job application your absolute best. I know it can get tiresome. It's just about literally giving each application your absolute best. And if you find that you're not qualified or that you lack experience, I'd say reach out to some people on LinkedIn and just ask for their advice. So say you see a HR manager who happens to work in a company that you'd like to apply to, I'd say reach out to them and say, you know what, I'm interested in this role. I lack the experience. I don't really know what I can do to make sure that I'm more qualified for this role. What would you encourage me to do? I'd say as well, in the meantime, make sure that you are upskilling, like Siobhan said, like do the online courses. I know so many people who did online courses on Harvard and whatnot, just to fill in the time. And I think as well, like I said, I know that like sometimes we want specific roles and things, but what can you be doing in the meantime in terms of your skills and your passions and what your desires are, what is in you that you can really keep doing on time? I know a friend who's a tailor. She just makes dresses, and that's what she does, and that's what she's passionate about. So yeah, I'd say just reach out to people, keep giving it your best shot, and see what you can do in your hands in the meantime.
very good. Thank you, Grace. That's really, really great. We have one more question. I'm just conscious of time. We have a graduate from an arts and humanities masters, and they're looking at, you know, what type of sectors would be eligible from them. So I might just jump in here and say that the UCD Careers Network service is open, and for graduates up to 2 years, as well as current students. So you can still actually use the service. So that student, it might be useful if they want to book in for a one-to-one, because with arts and humanities, there's so many different sectors that your skills are applicable to, that it's probably part of a bigger conversation, because you know, right across the board, public sector, EU jobs, marketing, HR, journalism, there's so many opportunities. So if that student wants to book into the career services, no problem. And I see Alumni are sharing the link. Camille, I'm just conscious of time. You may want to jump back in, but just to thank Grace and Siobhan, the information you were providing in your Q&A was really, really helpful, but also both your sessions were excellent. So I think our audience would have really benefited from that. So thank you both. I'll pop back to Camille.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Michelle. And definitely to echo what Michelle said, those are two incredible presentations. So thank you so much. I'm feeling so inspired, and I'm not even looking for a job. So that's great, you know. And Michelle, thank you as well for navigating the Q&A so well. It was really great to see the range of questions that people have. And to everyone who tuned in, just want to say, if we didn't get the chance to get to your question because we had loads coming in, do feel free to get in touch either through UCD Careers Network, as Michelle mentioned. Also, Siobhan and Grace's LinkedIn profiles have been linked in the chat earlier as well, if you want to give them a shout. So then I guess we have a few kind of last bits and pieces before we wrap up. So there are a few resources that are being shared in the chat. One of them is the UCD What It Takes Resource Hub. It's on the UCD Alumni Network. As recent graduates, you all would definitely benefit from setting up a profile there and navigating. We have the slides from today as well as the different resources. And there's a bunch of opportunities to network within that platform as well. It can be super helpful for job seekers. There is also the What It Takes Summer Series that wrapped back in August. If people haven't gotten the chance to take a look at that yet, it has 6 episodes covering a range of different topics that could be nice for different deep dives. So for example, for our arts and humanities graduate who had that question, there's an episode on what it takes to break into the arts and culture sector. There's also some great tips for working from home and what it takes to really boost your CV in interviews if you have more questions on top of what you heard today. And also, if you keep an eye on the What It Takes website, which I believe is being linked in the chat, we're going to be back in January for the winter series. So do keep an eye on that, and you'll be receiving emails through UCD Alumni as well as that starts to kind of take shape. And lastly, we would love to get your feedback on how this session went. It's going to really help us decide what topics to cover in our future winter series. So after this webinar wraps, you'll see a survey pop up. We'd love to get your thoughts on that. So otherwise, thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you for your wonderful questions, and do feel free to get in touch with any of us if you have any further thoughts. So in the meantime, stay safe and well, and talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Thanks, Camille. Bye, everyone.